Hi, I'm Melanie Smith here to talk about work environments. I want to talk about the work environment of my most favorite position I've had so far with my current organization, which was in compliance and privacy. I worked we just called it compliance. I worked in compliance for the for-profit arm of our organization, and a large healthcare organization, which is not profit. So, corporate culture, we have a really strong corporate culture at my organization. We have our mission, vision, values. We have a vision 2026 as we think about the future and what our consumers need and want. I think one thing that I have noticed is that our corporate culture is really strong, but sometimes there's 14 wholly owned hospitals within this organization. And sometimes as things filter down from corporate and into the actual hospitals where the work is being done to take care of our patients and why our organization exists, I think that the message gets lost a little bit, or that corporate may not realize that you can ask one thing to meet a rule, a regulation, to meet just a financial obligation that we have. But if you're not explaining exactly what's needed and why we have to do it a certain way, those of the hospitals feel like they're a little out of loop. Motivators at my company and in compliance. I think that somebody that works in compliance has to be rules driven person. We're not the people who are going to be out there speeding, although my director sped. I hated driving with him. I hated it. I'd be like in the back seat about to throw up. But anyway, so in general, you want somebody that really wants to follow the rules and regulations, that really cares about doing the right thing, which was the name of our compliance presentation for new employee orientation, doing the right thing. But so there's the motivators, just there to have somebody that really cares about all of that. The company does do yearly merit raises, yearly success sharing bonuses, and within compliance, there's always a lot of room for growth in your career. So there's a motivator there too. Best practices. One thing that compliance is huge on is best practices. And so that was one of my favorite things, actually, is that whenever there was a new rule or regulation coming out, or we found out that, hey, on the OIG work plan for next year, they're adding physical therapy audits. What are we going to do about this? And you really had to sit down with your team and say, okay, what laws is it that we have to follow? Okay, are we following those laws? Great. Now, if we're going to get audited, what are they going to look at? And how are the auditors going to interpret something? Are we as an organization, do we want to say we're going to do the bare minimum to meet the audit? Or are we going to say, no, we're going to do the best practice, whatever the best practice is, that so whoever comes in and however they interpret that law, we're covered. And so that's something that we had to explain a lot with our audits that we did, or education that we did, to say, look, yes, we understand that this is what the rule states. However, this can be looked at in numerous different ways. There's some gray area here. So we're going to do a best practice to make sure that no matter how anybody interprets this law, this rule, that we're going to follow within a green area where we're okay no matter how they look at it. And so that's always something we talked about, best practice, and I really enjoyed that. It was fun to have that conversation. Let's see, organizational attitude. I think my organization has a great attitude. This past year has been hard for our organization. We've had to restructure in order to align ourselves with the future of healthcare. So CMS payments for Center for Medicare and Medicaid, every year the reimbursements for things dwindle just a little bit. And other payers fall in line, so every year you got to get leaner and leaner, and you have to start thinking about the future. And consumers are very experience driven, and so we have to give them a good experience and just think about how can we keep the people coming back to us, and we don't want to be just here for them when they're sick or need a surgery. We want to be here for them to keep them healthy. So our organization is very in tune with the future and trying to lay out how we can meet our goals for the future. And just because of that, we had to restructure, and there were quite a few layoffs. We were in the news. It was not fun. But I understand why they do what they do. Now, saying that, I understand I was not laid off. Those people that were laid off and were not able to find a job within the organization, probably harder for them to understand. Creativity. In compliance, it is really important to be creative in getting the work done, because as I said, sometimes, you can interpret a rule or a regulation many different ways. They're not black and white. They really aren't. That was something I had to learn. And so as a team, as a work group, we would always get together and just hash out, the different things and the different just issues that are coming up and how can we meet them. And so thinking outside the box was something that was really, really valued. And then productivity and compliance, it's really hard to measure or to predict. So it's very subjective measurement on productivity for somebody who works in compliance. It really just depends on how many issues are presented in a given month or quarter. And to say that you don't want many issues, that's actually a hard thing to say, because you want your hospitals running well. You want people to be satisfied, and you want everybody to be following all the rules and regulations. You don't want anyone to be billing inappropriately or sharing protected health information when they shouldn't be, but things happen. And a lot of times it's just, people are moving too fast and things happen. So you don't want things reported like that. But at the same time, when things aren't reported, or if you have a month or a quarter where a specific hospital, there's not a lot of activity coming from it, you're happy, but at the same time, you're worried, because you're thinking, okay, does that hospital, as the leadership there, giving off to the employees a culture of fear that they can't report? We would much rather, in compliance, see somebody report something and it turns out to be nothing than something to be reported to not be reported when it should have been, and it's a huge issue. So productivity, it's just, you just have to do the best with what you can. So this is the work environment in compliance. Overall, I would say it can be extremely stressful, just because of the pressure that is there. Because if you mess up as somebody in compliance and you teach a hospital something that was wrong, things can go very wrong. But if you do your diligence and due diligence and your research and you work with your leaders, it's actually a really fun environment. So.